Good evening. At this time, if you would, please silence your cell phones and be advised that these proceedings are being recorded. If you desire to address the City Council during the meeting, please complete a request to speak form. They are available at the front by the door. Speakers will be called upon at the appropriate time, and each person is allowed 3 minutes speaking time. I'll call to order this meeting of the City of Grand Terrace. This is our February 11th regular meeting, and tonight we will be closing in the memory of Councilmember Hussey's mother, Charlene Hussey. And then at this time, we'll have an invocation given to us by Pastor Mike Leno of Azure Hills Seventh-day Adventist Church. Pastor Leno, would you please come forward? And if you would stand for the invocation or remain standing, our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Claudio Espino.
Father God, we are privileged to invoke your presence here. Thank you for this council, for the leadership here, for those you have inspired to do good in our community. And so we pray for wisdom and care and grace and hope. We thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Good evening. Please join me as we pledge allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Leno. Thank you, Mr. Espino. Madam City Clerk, may we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Allen.
I'm here.
Councilmember Hussey.
Present.
Councilmember Robles. Present. Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
I'm here.
Mayor McNabo.
Present.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight we have a special presentation. We will be giving a proclamation of America Saves Week, and here from credit.org is Mr. Claudio Espino. If you tell us a little bit about this program, and then I will read the proclamation to you, and we'll
Thank you. Good evening. The purpose of the America Saves Week is to place emphasis on saving and to save. It's usually, it's a national campaign, and it's held annually at the last week of February. My name is Claudio Espino, as the mayor says, and I'm with credit.org Springboard Nonprofit. Together with Springboard Nonprofit and credit.org, we've had the honor to manage the local campaign dubbed Inland Empire Saves since 2012. So based on recent reports, we have a savings crisis in America, and 40% of the families responded that they would not be able to handle a $400 crisis that they would have in an emergency, and that they would have to sell something personal in order to get over the crisis. Whether we're starting an emergency savings account for a emergency savings, or saving for a goal like a car, a home, or educational, we encourage everyone during America Savings Week to take a positive financial action. So you take the pledge by logging on to www.inlandempiresaves.org. People take the pledge. People who take the pledge are 90% more susceptible to reaching their goals. And so when you take the pledge, there is no private information that is required. We do not ask for any social security numbers, or we do not ask for any address or anything, any banking information or anything like that. It's simply making a pledge. And so when making the pledge, you set the goal to receive helpful tips and other useful information to reach that goal.
Very nice. Right. So stay right there. So I'm going to read this, and then we're going to join you over here and present and have a photo op. City of Grand Terrace Proclamation, America Saves Week. Whereas personal and household savings is fundamental to America's stability and vitality, And whereas adequate emergency savings, retirement funds, and safe debt income ratios are critical components of personal financial security, and whereas America Saves is a national social marketing campaign to persuade, encourage, and motivate Americans to take financial action in building wealth through saving money and reducing debt. And whereas Credit.org, as the Inland Empire Saves Coordinator, is a partner in the America Saves Week campaign and is committed to helping its citizens take immediate financial action to build wealth and not debt. And whereas we call upon all community members to increase 401k, 403b, SEP or IRA contributions, start or increase an emergency fund, and challenge employees or customers to save. And whereas we encourage all community members to take action towards positive wealth building action during America Saves Week and the rest of the year too. It's not in here, but I'll add that. And pledge to sustain that action during the following year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Darcy McNaboe, Mayor of the City of Grand Terrace, along with my fellow council members, do hereby proclaim the week of February 24th through 29th, 2020 as America Saves Week in the City of Grand Terrace, and do hereby urge all citizens to become an Inland Empire saver, to start or increase an emergency fund, reduce debt, begin or increase retirement contributions, and take other positive wealth-building action during America Saves Week, and pledge to sustain that action during the following year. Is presented this 11th day of February 2020, and it is signed by the entire council. Now, if you would, we'd like to have a photo over here presenting you the plaque. So we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. Next item is an opportunity to reorder or remove items from the agenda. Do we have any need to do that?
We do not, Mayor.
Okay. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by City Council at one time without discussion. Any council member, staff member, or citizen may remove an item from the consent calendar for discussion. Are there any requests for removal of items at this time? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the consent calendar.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to
The adoption of the,
make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
and I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Hussey, second by Councilmember Allen. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with council members Allen, Hussey, and Robles voting yes, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson voting yes, and Mayor McNaboe voting yes.
Thank you. Our next item is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not appearing on the regular agenda. Because of restrictions contained in California law, the City Council may not discuss or act on any item not on the agenda, but may briefly ask a question for clarification. A brief response from staff may be requested as well, and matters may be agendized for future meetings. Do we have requests to speak at this time?
We do, Madam Mayor. However, I do have one where a speaker card was dropped off today from an Isaac Steinline that just wanted to comment on the public safety issues in the Highland Apartments.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so in the room tonight, we do have Scott Ward, who is here from the Board of Supervisors.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for letting me take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Scott Ward. I am a field representative for San Bernardino County 3rd District Supervisor Dawn Rao. I have had the pleasure of meeting the mayor on a number of occasions and some of you individually at different events in town. Thank you very much for letting me take just a minute to introduce myself. If anyone on the council or in the chambers has any business or questions relating to what's going on in the county, please do look me up. I will be happy to pass along contact information for myself and for our office. Thank you.
Thank you. So you'll leave that contact information with the city clerk? Yes. All right, thank you. Are there any other requests to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Will somebody from staff follow up with the person that called in regarding the law enforcement issues? Or will that be given to the sheriff?
The city manager has been made aware of that.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to council for their communications. And before we get into the actual reports from council members, we do have item 9 here, which is our ad hoc committee update. And so we appointed Councilmember Hussey and Councilmember Allen to ad hoc committee to choose a local veteran that will be honored at the Miller Park Amphitheater Veterans Memorial in the city of Fontana. Do either or both of you want to give an update?
Okay.
Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. So on January 30th, the ad hoc committee met with the city manager, Councilmember Hussey and I. And through Councilmember Hussey's initiative to contact and work with some of the Girl Scouts who are familiar with some of the seniors in our community, we learned about a veteran in our community, and we selected Mr. Toshiro Henry Kanbara. His nickname is Hank Kanbara. And Hank Kanbara was born in Oakdale, California on March 29, 1920. And he was drafted into the Army, where he was on December 30, 1941, as a combat engineer, and he was stationed in several places in the U.S., and he was also served in the European Combat Theater, was wounded in Italy. He was with the famed 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which was made up mostly of volunteers out of the Japanese internment camps. So he served throughout the World War II, and then he came back, and he received a Good Conduct Medal and a Victory Medal and the various campaign medals from World War II that he was in. And so we recommended, or we have selected him and forwarded his information to the folks in Fontana. Mr. Kanbara is a resident of one of our senior centers here in town. He's 100 years old, just before the ceremony that he's being nominated for in April. You know, he turns on March 30, 100 years old. So that's pretty impressive. And that's who we selected. Thank you for your time.
Councilmember Hussey.
First of all, I wanted to say, thank you, Jim, and the mayor too, because they directed us in that spot about, the Girl Scouts were interviewing. His nickname's Hank, so he likes to go by Hank, and I guess he's the Troop 76 new grandfather now, so. But they really had a good time with him. He also was awarded the Purple Heart when he was shot in the knee in Italy, and he was awarded a Congressional Gold Medal. This award is bestowed by the U.S. Congress. It looks like a big coin, but that's for like the Tuskegee soldiers and all that. They have that gold medal. his parents, while he was fighting during World War II, his parents were in a concentration camp over there in internment camp up here in Bishop. So just imagine you're fighting for a country and your parents are locked up. There was some dark times in the United States back then. But he gave it all, and he gave it all to his men that he fought along with and his sisters. And, well, I haven't met the man yet, but he seems like a really nice guy. And, he's going to be 100 years old here pretty soon. So what a great birthday gift that would be for him, too. So, but, I like it that he lives in Grand Terrace and he's still around, and we can honor that man. And he's probably going to be shy about it because most veterans don't like to be honored because it goes with all their buddies and stuff. But that's what we recommend, and I hope the council takes that recommendation in consideration. Thank you.
Councilmember Allen.
I just wanted to add one more thing. If there's anybody who's interested in what we're just Councilmember Hussey and I were talking about, the exploits of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and this veteran, there's a movie that was made about him called Go for Broke. You can look it up. It's worth the watch.
Thank you. So as I understand, the timeline was tight on this, and so this is who you chose, and this is who's going to be honored, correct?
Yes, Mayor. Staff did follow up, and city clerks contacted the city of Fontana, sent the paperwork in, and so it's all set and ready to go.
Okay, and there will be a ceremony in Fontana that we are all invited to
Yes.
attend.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your work on this. I know it was a short turnaround, and you got the job done, and it looks to me like you chose a really good candidate, so thank you so much. All right, so we'll come back to Councilmember Allen for your report.
Okay. I need to real quickly pull it up. Okay. Since our last meeting, on January the 29th, I attended the special council meeting with the quarterly training, council best practices, which was presented by JPIA. The 5 things that I took away from that anyway, that were reinforced in me was that we need to, maintain trust and respect and also open and genuine dissent, and rely on data, evaluations, and various other things. And then on the 30th, as I mentioned earlier, I attended the ad hoc committee with Councilmember Hussey. And then that evening, I attended the State of the 47th Districts, where Assemblymember Eloise Reyes recapped the past year's accomplishments in the 47th Assembly District, including some new protections for women's and crime victims' rights, and $1.2 million for the Blue Mountain Park and Trailhead. On the next day, on the 31st, I also attended the special meeting of the City Council and Planning Commission on workplace harassment training for supervisors and local agency officials. And on February the 4th, I attended the Omnitrans meeting, Connect SoCal, that we had here at City Hall. And that was the information meeting where the residents met in the community room and heard from the 2 representatives from Omnitrans about the changes to the routes. The biggest concerns expressed in those meetings were the elimination of the Route 325 to the Senior Center and replacing it with Route 305 to the Community Center here. And some other concerns expressed about some kids who participate in after-school programs over at the high school, and they catch the 325 in High Grove and ride it up to Michigan, and where they make their connections. And that, with the elimination of 325, they won't be able to do that anymore. Or the folks who catch it in the mornings and go to work in San Bernardino. There were some of those at that meeting. The following day, on February 5, I attended the Omnitrans board meeting, and we had the same SoCal Connect presentation from Mr. Bryant that day, and I also was pleased to see some residents from Grand Terrace at that board meeting who got up to speak and spoke and told the same situations and concerns they had there. The board members were very open-minded and listened to them and took it all into account, and I appreciated that. We also approved $5.4 million for the purchase of 4 zero-emission all-electric buses, and we approved a second item on the agenda that allows Omnitrans to be eligible to apply for grants to help pay for the 4 buses. And last thing I want to mention is I stopped by the grocery outlet yesterday to see how things are progressing, and I'm like most folks, I'm really excited about this new addition to our community, and so I want to again congratulate Eric and Priscilla Santillian, you know, the owners of the market, for this tremendous accomplishment, and I'm really looking forward to attending the grand opening ribbon cutting ceremony next week on February 20, and I hope I see all of you all there too. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Bill Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank you guys for honoring my mother during this council meeting. And thank everybody for the messages, the phone calls, the emails. And it's kind of bittersweet. She was with my wife 2 weeks ago watching the council meeting, and she told me to wear light clothes from now on, but I got a dark suit on today. So she's probably up there talking down about me again. But it was a beautiful thing. We know she's in paradise in heaven. And she was passed at her house, surrounded by her grandkids, her great-granddaughter. Everybody got to say goodbye to her. And it's kind of strange that, you know, your mother brings you in this world and she sees you take your first breath and you get to see her take her last. So we're at peace. And once again, I just want to thank the community and the family and friends who are out there, all the kind words and well wishes. So thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Councilmember Hussey. Councilmember Sylvia Robles.
Just quickly report, I also attended the hostile work harassment training and the team building exercise for the city council.
Thank you, Councilmember Robles. Mayor Pro Tem Doug Wilson.
Yes, I also attended the same harassment training and the other training and found it to be a worthwhile cause.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I attended the workplace harassment prevention training, as well as the special meeting for team building. And I'm looking forward to the ribbon cutting on the 20th. And that's my report. Thank you, Councilmember Allen, for attending Omnitrans for me.
You are welcome, Mayor.
All right, so we will move on to our agenda as scheduled. We do not have public hearings tonight. We do not have any unfinished business, so we'll move to new business, starting with resolution and ordinance for ratification and adoption of the 2019 California Fire Code with local amendments. Stephen Weiss, Planning and Development Services Director.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and council members, City Attorney and City Manager. For the record, my name is Steve Weiss, Planning and Development Services Director. The item before you, as the mayor pointed, is the adoption of the 2019 California Code with local ordinances. So, as a background, every 3 years, the state of California, through the state fire marshal, amends and adopts the California Fire Code. The most recent amendments were completed and publicized on the 1st of July of 19. Local jurisdictions must enforce the state code. The San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors, acting as the Board of Directors for San Bernardino County Fire Protection District, considered and approved the 2019 Fire Code with local amendments for final adoption on the 28th of January of 2020, pursuant to its ordinance. When the district adopts the 2019 Fire Code with local amendments, the district is required to have their ordinance ratified by the city. So what does that mean to Grand Terrace? We need to amend our code, chapter 15.18, of the Grand Terrace Municipal Code. And the way it works is we adopt by resolution that the City Council will also set a public hearing, the next council hearing, to hear input from the public prior to the proposed second reading and adoption of the 2019 Fire Code with local amendments. In closing, staff recommends that the City Council will set a public hearing for the 25th to hear input from the public prior to the proposed second reading and adoption of the code based on the resolution before you. That does conclude staff's presentation. We also have a representative from the San Bernardino County Fire, Assistant Fire Marshal Adam Panos, who would be happy to answer questions or even make a brief presentation. It's your pleasure. That concludes staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weiss. Councilmember Allen.
Oh, one other thing. I'm sorry.
Oh, too late. No, go ahead.
Well, okay. As the city attorney is pointing at me.
Go,
Thank you.
Director. My apologies.
No,
Please continue.
That's okay. I shouldn't have. We do recommend that the county direct the city attorney to read the title by title and waive further reading and introduce the ordinance for the fire code.
Okay, prior to our vote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councilmember Allen, you have questions?
I do, Mayor, thank you. It's on packet page 119. It talks about discusses the open fires, recreational fires, open flames and torches, and the permit requirements. And so my question is that, because it sounds like that this means that by reading this, that a resident who has a little fire pit in their backyard or on their patio that they go out in the evening and sit around, put chunks of wood in that they buy at Staters, is going to need a permit. Or somebody who uses a wood-burning fireplace in their home is going to need a permit. Is that correct?
That's the way it looks, but the key term is assemblies. And actually, I believe that's an operational permit is used for assembly areas, which tied by the Uniform Building and Fire Code is a little bit different. But keep in mind, though, parts of Grand Terrace are in a high fire hazard zone, so having open fire certain times of the year is definitely not allowed. So it's just to be consistent.
So, but will they be required a permit to have an open fire in their, say, like I described?
I'll have Assistant Fire Marshal Panos answer.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Adam Panos, Deputy Fire Marshal with the San Bernardino County Fire Protection District. So in answer to your question, Councilmember Allen, recreational fires is what we call those fires that are that you would have, in your backyard or something like that, in a fire dish or pit or something like that. They're limited in size. They don't require a permit, and that's exactly why they're limited in size, and so they're deemed safe as long as they're spaced, about 25 feet, I think it is, away from the structure. The types of open fires that need a permit are those that are conducted by an agricultural operation, which we have in some of the areas in the valley, like Mentone. We also have in the high desert. We have some farms that burn agricultural waste, as well as in the high desert, you're allowed to do the burning of the residential waste. But in the valley here, South Coast Air Quality Management District doesn't allow that. So really, and it's really works out for the better anyway because of the high fire hazard area that we have in close proximity to Grand Terrace. That really the only fire you can have is the recreational type, but you still have to adhere to the requirements in the ordinance.
So speaking of the having the adhering to the requirements, and you mentioned AQMD. Are AQMD's requirements different also for combustible fires, wood-burning fires, recreational fires? I mean, how does a person know who's using having a wood-burning fire, for example, outdoors, recreational type in their home here in our community, that it's okay, for the air quality?
Right. So We have on our website, it's posted when it's a permissive burn day. That mostly applies to burning of, like I said, waste, or agricultural, residential, combustible waste. But, I mean, we have that posted as far as when it's a red flag event, when there's a burn restriction. So residents can see that. They can see the status of the fire weather, fire behavior, and so forth. But again, I mean, the limitations are all in the ordinance. We don't really regulate too much the recreational fires. However, if there's a complaint regarding that, or definitely if there's an incident where, you know, it does cause a fire or something like that, then we have the ability, obviously, to respond, but also to enforce, to make sure that that doesn't happen again, or that make sure that fire doesn't get out of control. We'll respond out. We have investigators that will respond out. We could do it, a citation if that's, you know, appropriate, or at least order the person, with the authority in the ordinance, we can order the person to put the fire out.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I just have one more question, and I'm not sure which one of you two gentlemen would answer it, but on page 121, where it talks about compost, and it says 200 cubic feet, over 200 cubic feet requires a permit, and I'm just wondering how much is that? Can, if you could, is that like a dump truck load or a pickup truck load?
Yeah, so I can just kind of paint a broad brush stroke for you.
That'd be good.
Yeah, all those permits that you see outlined there, they all have thresholds. And really, the intent is for businesses that have a certain threshold of maybe storing combustible materials, maybe they're using hazardous materials or flammable liquids or something, maybe, or there are permits for like having a place of assembly, large, you know, banquet hall, restaurant, something like that. Those are permits that the fire code allows us to regulate those activities, actually mandates us to regulate those activities. There are, there's an inspection program that we do where we do those facilities annually. And the way that the facility gets into that program is by reaching that threshold. So it wouldn't be just someone who has, you know, a business and they just have a little bit of combustible stored or whatever. This would be like the large recycling facilities, tire storage places. We have a permit in there for pallet yards, things like that. Some of the things we see across the county, those are the ones that really are fire hazard and that we enforce, we do inspections on.
So the backyard gardener with his composting is not going to get
Right, no.
200 cubic meters or
Right, no, we won't.
feet,
We won't
200
haul
cubic
them to jail, nope. Yeah,
feet. Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Mr. City Attorney, did we address your issue? All right.
Yes, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Doug Wilson.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor. I'm a little bit concerned about us doing a wholesale adoption of a county code that's really set up to administrate things outside the city of San Bernardino's control or any of the incorporated cities. And when there hasn't been any culling whatsoever in relation to our particular condition, I find that there are many objectionable items within this code that would cause our citizens probably some angst if they were able to read through it. And one of the things that I found was that there's a unilateral right to enter any property, any private property, as well as any buildings by the fire chief or any of his designees. Somebody does that at my house, no matter what time it is, they're going to have a pistol in their face. I don't agree with the idea of just unilateral right to break into my home or enter my private property. And then also and most egregious, the right to fine and the amounts of the fines. They are, you know, they may be appropriate for the county of San Bernardino, and it might also feed the county of San Bernardino's fire situation, but certainly not right for the city of Grand Terrace. And then also, I guess, my question would be why we would not consider the adoption of a resolution that is set aside for just the enforcement of the 2019 California Fire Code and leave the local amendments to the county jurisdiction.
Those are really good questions, so I'll try to break that down piece by piece. So I'm not really sure the exact sections you're referring to, but I can speak in general terms. There are provisions in the ordinance for, like you said, entering a property, but only with reason when there's evidence that an egregious fire hazard exists. That's the intent of that.
Who constitutes that?
Well,
in this case, it would be the county, which is not the city.
Well, it's the fire department has that ability to, deem something a hazard, but we always do that in cooperation with the city departments like code enforcement, building and safety. I mean, we never go really unassisted, or we always go accompanied with somebody else, especially when it's one of our cities that we serve. And that's really the purpose of the ordinance. It's a fire protection district ordinance. It's
I appreciate the explanation, but what I'm asking is that sounds like a policy. I don't see anywhere in here that it says it specifically. That sounds like a policy, and unwritten policies, as we know, are not worth the paper.
Yeah,
so
there definitely is criteria that would have to be met in order for something to be deemed a fire hazard. Something that would be, for instance, we do get complaints from time to time that something is a perceived fire hazard, for instance. We'll go and investigate that, inspect that. We won't enter the property. We'll just attempt to observe that. And in some cases, we find, in fact, many cases, we find that it's really not a fire hazard. It's a fire hazard to somebody else because it's a dead tree or something like that. But really, in order to exercise the authority of that part of the ordinance, it would have to be something pretty egregious. Maybe somebody running an illegal business with using explosives or flammable liquids or something like that on a property. And that's something I'm sure as a city, the city council would be concerned with, the neighbors would be concerned with, business owners, and certainly us as emergency responders. That's to protect all of us. In majority of the cases, though, if there's something that's really not egregious, we'll go ahead and attempt to make contact with them, and we'll request, can we do an inspection? And if they deny us, then if there's something pretty big there that we really need to see, we'll go through the appropriate channels, get an inspection warrant, and we'll go ahead and come back with the sheriff's department, and we'll do that inspection.
And what you're telling me is that language is in this ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Okay, take your word for it. The big concern I have, I had a neighbor once upon a time, and there was a fire on my slope, and she knocked on the door and ran through my house and through my sliding glass door and raced out and turned on my hose and went out to put out a little tiny spot fire on my slope. That's not a good reason to open up my home and the security of my home to someone, and I'd like to think that whoever's doing that actually has authority granted to him by my city. And at this point, I'm leaving all this authority to the county, and that's a problem for me, because I live in the city, I don't live in the county. If I chose to live in the county, then I would live in the county, but I'm not in an unincorporated area. So I feel like there are lots of things within this that seem like they overstep what we really need in the city, and I don't feel like it's been properly culled. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Well, that would lead me to my question then, Mr. City Attorney. If this is something that has been given to us by the state that we have to adopt, then do we look at the local amendments, which would be for the county? Is that something that we have the ability to take out?
Sure. So under state law, each city has to have a fire code. By default, we would default to the 2019 state fire code if we do nothing. A city has options to amend that state fire code for local climatic, geological, topographical reasons. So for example, you see that occurs many times in coastal cities where their soil is different. You see it in hillside communities where, because of the hillsides, they need different standards. So that's one area. The other area is administrative procedures. Cities have more discretion over that. If the council decided to go solely on the 2019 state fire code, it has that authority to do. If the city council does not wish to use the county amendments, they're welcome to do that as well. The only question, and I leave it to the fire official to speak to, is I understand what the fire department is trying to do. They want to be able to enforce the same code across the county rather than have to have separate regulations in each jurisdiction. So this makes it a little bit easier for the county to enforce the code within our jurisdiction. I will note that my understanding is the city has already designated the fire department as the agency to enforce our fire code. So the only thing that is before the council tonight is which fire code are they going to be enforcing? The 2019 state fire code, as approved by the state, the state code with the amendments that the county has adopted. The council has other options. Two other options are they can pick and choose which county provisions they like and which county provisions they don't, and we can adopt that version. Or the city council can adopt a different ordinance, which is solely what the city council wants as amendments to the state fire code.
As long as it has the state fire code.
As a basis.
And then we amend to that.
That's correct.
Is there a way for us to know the difference between the California version and the amendments that the county has stated?
Yes. I believe it's in the agenda item, there is a matrix. There it is, thank you. I prepared that just as a quick reference. Those are the major areas where we've made amendments. And if you'll notice there under...
Packet page 207.
Yes, thank you. And so under that column there, reason justification, a lot of the reason why we make the amendments is it's not so much substantive, it's to clarify and to speak to the city attorney's statements. A lot of the amendments are actually they're under different wording in a different spot in the fire code. What we've done is we've taken them and making them more specific so that we can have a little bit more of a legal basis to enforce them. And so we reworded them and then we put them in different spots in the ordinance. And that's why you see all those sections. And then that way, you know, if it's one of the, just to give you an example, which the city deals with, illegal fireworks. And we've assisted the city for years now enforcing illegal fireworks. So the fines for illegal fireworks are in that. Councilmember mentioned, you know, the penalties, the table of the penalties and such. So that's, the code, fire code doesn't really get that specific. It says it's a misdemeanor. But we have an administrative citation part of the ordinance, which we find is much more effective in enforcing illegal fireworks. So that's kind of an example of some of the amendments that we've made. There's some things about addressing, for instance, fire department access roads. You see this, the item open burning, pallet yards, which probably doesn't apply too much to the city. So those are local things that we come across where we're wanting to make sure that our emergency responders have the fire access roads, the water supply for fire protection, the addressing posted, all those things that really the fire code, that's why it's there. It's to protect the members of the community, but also emergency responders too. So, you know, and I can answer specific questions, but those are the major categories there where we've done amendments.
It looks like most of the amendments that you've added have nothing to do with access to property, that was part of the underlying. All right. Any, Councilmember Allen?
I have the same concerns that Mayor Pro Tem Wilson has expressed, as shown on packet page 154, my authority to inspect, issue notification. But whenever the city attorney was discussing our options, and he mentioned about, the 2019, is this a change to the 2019? Is it with this authority to inspect, or would that just adopting or keeping last year's might not answer this concern?
My understanding is this is 2019, but Mr. City Attorney, will you clarify your answer?
Yes, this is the 2019. This would replace, I believe, the 2016 fire code.
Oh, I see. So, just a quick read-through this, and listening to Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, the fire code official has more authority than, a police officer has to get a warrant to come in somebody's place, and a fire code official does not.
On packet page 207 on that table, my understanding, if this is correct, those are the only things that the county has added. Is that true? The table that you have on page, well, it's our packet page 207. So it's like section 105.6, 202, 308, 503, 505, 507, 903, and 2810 are listed here in this table. This is the extent to the amendments that the county is making. Is that true?
Yes, those are the areas where we've amended.
Okay, so everything else that is not in this table is what the state is saying we must comply with.
Correct.
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mayor, and perhaps one of the things that we can do at the second reading is we can come back and bring sort of the overlay. We can show the base of the 2019 and just kind of either red line or highlight where the county has made any of the changes so you can see the differences. Because if it's actually, I think maybe some of the changes that are a little different from the state code, maybe from the previous code. And so you want to look at the base and then look at what is more county-specific, what county fire added. So that's one way to do is to kind of put an overlay over the standard code so the council can really see this. And this chart tries to represent that, but we can always put that overlay on top of this.
Mr. City Attorney?
Back on the access issue, I will point to packet page 154. There's a section here, authority to inspect, issue notices, and administrative citations or abate a hazardous condition. And I'll read the relevant portion. Whenever it is necessary to make an inspection to enforce the provisions of this code, or whenever the fire code official has reasonable cause to believe that there exists in a building or premises any conditions or activity requiring a permit authorized by this code, or reasonably believes that there are any violations of this code which makes a building premises condition or activity unsafe, dangerous, or hazardous, the fire code official and those personnel designated by the fire code official are authorized to enter at all reasonable times upon any property, premises, enclosure, structure, vehicle, or vessel within the district to determine whether the blah, blah, blah is in compliance with the code. I don't want to keep reading all the, but what the code is providing is that they cannot just show up and go in at any time. There has to be a reasonable basis to go in, and it has to be done at reasonable times. At any other point in time, I would argue they do need a warrant, as was suggested earlier.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other lights on, I'll open it up to public comment. Are there any requests to speak on this item?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. Close public comment and bring it back to council for their consideration of action at this time.
Madam Mayor, if I may?
Mr. City Attorney?
Yes. So just to recap, the council has 4 options. Option 1 is to adopt the state code without any amendments. To do that, I would ask the council to direct staff to bring back an ordinance to amend our municipal code to just reflect the state code as the fire code of the city. Option 2 is to proceed with what staff is recommending tonight, which is to adopt the state fire code with the county's amendments. Option 3 is, if the council is interested in some but not others, is to direct staff to explore which ones would be best for the city council and the city to have and which ones would not be. Option 4 is to completely disregard what the county has done and do what we want to do for our own city and adopt our own local amendments.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for option 3.
Option 3 is what again?
Option 3 was to adopt the state code with some of the county's proposed amendments, but not all, and to direct staff to explore which ones would be best for the city and which ones would not be.
All right.
Second.
All right. Motion by Councilmember Hussey for option number 3 as described by the city attorney.
Yes, and before we do, just so the council is aware, until such time as the city council adopts an ordinance, first and second reading, and 30 days thereafter, until that effective date of the ordinance, we are governed by the state law, as is without any local amendments.
Okay. Second by Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
And
And there's just something that you would like to read to us.
I will in a second. One other point is, does council, in making the motion, if the motion is granted, I would ask that council give staff direction on what issues maybe to focus on before coming back with another proposed ordinance. So with.
All right, so Councilmember Hussey, as part of your motion, would you like to tell city manager which items are those that you would like him to focus on?
All of them.
So all of the ones in the table, you're saying he should look
Just
at
go
and
through, yeah.
determine which ones he thinks are good for our city?
Yeah, I'd like them to refocus on which one we think is good for our city and bring it back to the council for our approval. And especially the one about what's that package, page 154? About
Well, actually, page 207,
207, I mean.
if you look at that table, those are the amendments that the county is making. And so of that table on packet page 207, would you like to include as part of your motion the ones that you would like him to look at?
Well, it'd be section 105.6, various permits, 202 definitions, pretty much all of them.
Okay, all of them on the table. Is that your agreement, Mayor Pro Tem, for the second?
Yes, according to the little light thing. My thought is that in order for us to make that determination, we do really have to look at all of them. I'd like us to keep in mind that this table that's been produced is a summarized version. And with a summary, you don't get enough detail to be able to determine what's applicable to the city.
Right, so you're concurring with the
That's
maker of the motion that it's everything in this table that he will look at? Okay. All right,
Would you like me to restate it? Or are we good?
please restate.
Thank you, Mayor. So the motion is to direct staff to review all the amendments proposed by the County Fire Protection District with respect to the amendments to the 2019 Fire Code, and to bring back a revised ordinance which addresses the amendments that staff believes are best applicable to the city and remove those provisions that the city staff does not believe are beneficial to the city.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Hussey and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. And you will not be reading the name of the ordinance because we will do that next time.
That is correct.
Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with council members Allen, Hussey, and Robles voting yes, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson voting yes, and Mayor McNabo voting yes.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for being here and your discussion. All right, so item number 11 is amendment number 1 to agreement with TSR Construction for the Preston Signal Modification Project to add to scope of work and increase maximum contract amount from $82,000 to $117,800. Mr. Alan French, Public Works Director.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I'm here to present this item, this contract amendment number 1 with TSR for the Preston Signal Modification Project. The staff report supports the 2030 goal number 2 to maintain public safety by investing in critical improvements to the infrastructure. This project is upgrading the traffic signal at Preston and Barton to include 5 head left turn signals on Barton. After the contract was awarded and work began, the contractor found existing conduits corroded beyond the use and was unable to pull wires for replacement. The existing metal conduits were unusable and unable to be reused, and the wires were unable to be removed. Without being able to use the existing conduits, additional pavement will be needed to be removed around the intersection, both concrete and asphalt. Existing pole boxes will need to be replaced, and abandoned where needed. New conduits will be trenched across Preston to allow access underground from all 4 corners. The new conduits will be trenched across Preston in 2 locations, the red locations on the map. The conduit will be installed, the trenches will be backfilled, and surfaces paved. Also, we need an open trench along the back of the sidewalk along Barton for the advanced loop. At this time, staff is recommending that council approve the amendment number 1 and authorize the city manager to execute the amendment and the change order with TSR for the additional contract amount of $35,800. Should council have any questions, Edward Nyland with Webb and Associates, the contract inspector, and I will be here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director French. I have a question for you. We had 3 bids on the original contract. So for this added work, did we go out for additional bids?
No, we did not go out for additional bids, Madam Mayor. The construction had begun already. He was able to utilize 1 conduit that was put in at a later time. And so he had started that contract, got that line in, and then we discovered that later the additional conduits were unusable. So to rebid the additional work would have been more of a compromise to the original contract, because we have already awarded the original contract for the construction of the project. So we felt it's best at this time to get the quotes for the additional work and move forward with that.
All right, remind me again why we're doing this work.
This work is to upgrade the signals at Barton and Preston to include a left turn indication, a 5-head left turn indicator for the Barton traffic.
All right, and the contract that we approved in October, when was the notice to proceed on work with that?
That didn't occur until January. And that's because at the time the contract was awarded, we had negotiated with the contractor, and he had put the order for the equipment in right away, but there was a delay, a backlog in the equipment. So we delayed the notice to proceed until he was going to get the equipment.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a couple of questions, Mr. French. How old would you approximate the loops that were in there that are unusable?
The conduits that are in there were the original conduits, I'm pretty sure.
Might have been placed by the county.
It definitely was
Yeah.
when they widened Barton, and that was in the early 70s. is
Okay,
when that-
and
that's
is this
the
our
one.
contractor here?
This is our contract
Can I talk to
inspector, Mr. Edward Nyland.
And if I'm correct, it appears as if the change order is mostly having to replace all the pavement, which is oftentimes the most expensive part. So we're talking about minus $7,000 out of the 40 grand that we're talking about. So, you know, $7,000 is for the loop. The rest of it's all the concrete and asphalt and hauling it away and cutting and all the rest of that jazz. It gets ridiculous. So my question would be, with this kind of entrance, we have like a lot of traffic. So your game plan is to put this thing bulletproof back in, because I've always been in favor of the idea of no more open cuts in Barton Road, you know, because it's a monster. So I'd like to find out how we're putting it back in.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. Ed Nyland, Albert Webb Associates, Senior Construction Inspector. Just for clarification, I'm not representing the contractor. I'm actually a third-party inspector who's overseeing the contractor's work. To answer your question about the installation of new conduits, the original design did call for a boring for the crossing of the conduit on Barton Road. The additional 2 conduits that are going to be added simply for the signal crossings will be open trench, but they'll be open trench on Preston outside of the limits of Barton Road.
Excellent.
And
Great.
one other thing I think that's important to note is, in addition to the equipment being very old, and I would agree with Mr. French's assessment of 1970s being probably about the time frame that equipment was installed, there also was a traffic collision that damaged the existing controller cabinet, which is the most expensive part of the signal system itself. So that's an important factor to consider, Madam Mayor, when you ask why is this project being done. You're having the addition of the 5-section heads, which will allow a protected or permissive left turn at the intersection, combined with you're going to have an upgraded controller cabinet.
Thank you.
Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. If I recall, didn't we use some of the Spring Mountain Ranch Fund? And I'm just wondering if any of that fund's available to cover some of this cost? And are we using it for that?
Yes, Councilmember Allen. We had a certain percentage of traffic going through that intersection. That's the percentage of the Spring Mountain Fund we were using for this project. This additional will be coming out of our CP&A Measure I for arterials. That just for the amendment would cover that cost.
So we can't use, is it because of we can't use the Spring Mountain Ranch Fund for the amended,
There has to be a nexus. That fund was set up for traffic mitigation through the city, and their traffic study showed the impacts to all our intersections, or they showed the ones that were impacted, and that's what the money would go for.
Okay, thank you, Mr. French.
Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, my questions have been answered. So.
All right, thank you. Let's go back to the box that was destroyed. What are we doing with this new construction to protect that box from it being hit again? Because I don't believe that the controlled intersection is going to save that box. So my question is twofold. What are we doing to save that box, and what are we doing to stop people from running the lights? Because that's really where we get into a lot of the traffic collision issues. And how will this project manage that?
With this new construction, the new controller cabinet is set back farther from the curb line, and it would be more protected by the existing traffic signal pole. Really, it was protecting it before. I don't know how that car got around the pole and then onto the cabinet, but it did, and now it is set back farther. The new one will be set back farther. As far as people running the light,
This
There-
isn't going to do anything to stop it.
There are the advanced signal signs that maybe we could do some enhancements to.
Okay, well, you answered my question. This isn't going to do anything to stop people from running lights. Thank you. Councilmember Hussey.
Oh, there goes my light. I think it might not do anything to stop people. People run the red lights and they run the stop signs. I don't, maybe put spike strips up there or something, but that's just human nature to do that. But, you know, it seems like, it's like when you work on your house, there's always something coming up. You always got to pay extra. And I think from now on, when we do these approvals, that we should consider at least a 10% padded for what's going to happen. Because even like when we did the construction for the drainage, you know, that was pretty, you know, this is old stuff that we're going through. The city hasn't been working on it. And, you know, it's coming age where it's, you know, deteriorating, corroded, what have you. So this is $35,000 just to get the job done right, and I agree on this. But I just think from now on, when we do this, we have to take in consideration 10% what might happen, because I know usually when you work on stuff, you always have a 10% buffer on there for everything. That's just my thoughts and concerns on that I brought up.
Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Mayor. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that this signal is, as the speakers said earlier, it's 1970s. It hasn't been really upgraded. It's the only major signal that we have in town that does not have the dedicated arrow. And so, and it is, if you just take that information itself, it is the intersection that has the most traffic collision issues. And so hopefully that by upgrading this section with that left turn arrow, that we will reduce the amount of potential collisions in the intersection.
Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. In response to Councilmember Hussey's issue regarding the cost, we do actually have that provision in the agreement. It's on page 217. Any additional work, any increase in compensation of up to 10% or $25,000, whichever is less, can be approved by the city manager. So that is in there. I believe this goes above 25,000, so that's why we're coming back. And then in response to the mayor's questions about the bidding, as the staff knows, I'm a very, very big stickler on bidding. But what we do is we look at the original agreement to see if the additional work is covered. And on packet page 239, in the scope of work that we included, task 4 in the middle of the page, contractor shall furnish and install new left turn indicator for Barton Road, controller and cabinet, and any and all related appurtenances for successful operation of the signal, including but not limited to any wiring that is required. So we felt that that was, this additional work was included within that task.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll open it up to public comment. Are there any requests to speak on this item?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to council for consideration of a motion. Thank you, gentlemen, for your report. Councilmember
Mayor,
Hussey.
I'd like to make the motion to approve and authorize the city manager executive amendment number 1 to amendment agreement with the TSR construction and inspection subject to city attorney approval as to from authorized city manager to, change order for additional work authorized by amendment number 1.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Hussey, second by Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with council members Allen, Hussey, and Robles voting yes, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson voting yes, and Mayor McNabo voting yes.
Thank you. Move on to item 12, which is consideration of City Council resolution establishing a training policy for the Planning Commission Site and Architectural Review Board. We will have a report by Director Steve Weiss, Planning and Development Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Again, my name is Steve Weiss, Director, for the record. This is actually, this is a policy For training policy, there is a planning commissioner vacancy open right now, and this is an opportune time to introduce a policy by recommendation. So Chapter 2.16 of the Grand Terrace Municipal Code establishes the Planning Commission or the Site and Architectural Review Board as the planning agency or the duly appointed land use agency of the city, and it's known as the Planning Commission. Right now, the city does not have a singular policy to provide guidance to planning commissioners on what trainings they are required to take or required schedules. So the commission is required by Assembly Bill 1234 to take action the first one is ethics training under the Political Reform Act. And so basically what the conflict of interest really involves is the Ralph Brown Act and the Public Records Act. This ethics training must be completed within 1 year of appointment and every 2 years thereafter. The next area is workplace harassment training. Harassment training pursuant to Senate Bill 1343 addresses sexual harassment prevention. And that must be also completed 6 months of appointment and every 2 years thereafter. And there are resources to deal with understanding state planning law, land use law. The one that is probably the most universally acceptable in California is done through the League of California Cities, and they host what's called a Planning Commissioner Academy, where the League provides several educational seminars, and quite a few actually, for planning commissioners in understanding planning and land use. So what staff has developed is proposing a formal policy that requires planning commissioners to participate in trainings, in addition to the trainings required under California law, which is ethics and workplace harassment training and land use training. To note, it is a failure to complete the ethics, the workplace harassment, or planning and land use training will be enough reason to remove a planning commissioner for cause under Section 2.16.030 of the Grand Terrace Municipal Code. Being that staff recommends that the city establish a resolution of the City of Grand Terrace establishing a training policy for the Grand Terrace Planning Commission or a Site and Architectural Review Board. That concludes staff's presentation. We're available to respond to any comments you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weiss. I don't see any lights in front of me. Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
We did receive at least one note, I guess, from one of the planning commissioners regarding this item.
Yes, sir.
And the general flavor of that note was that they were concerned, that there was concern expressed in relation to the autonomous nature of the planning commission. I think there might be a wrong assumption, so I think it'd be important for us to clarify it. And the city attorney can probably jump in on this if he'd like to clarify it even more. But this isn't the CIA or or Burger King. My understanding is that the Planning Commission serves as an advisory to the City Council.
Correct.
I do not believe that there's anything in the code that says they are autonomous necessarily, and that there is a restriction in relation to that. So as long as we understand we're all working together for the best for the citizens of Grand Terrace. And what I'm concerned about is that if there's a question about whether or not training is appropriate in this kind of circumstance, then maybe there should be some counsel with the planning commissioner that has a problem with this, so that he understands the true intent of what we want to do.
Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. To supplement your point, you're correct. The Planning Commission is advisory, but they also do have decision-making authority as granted by the City Council. That decision-making authority is subject to appeal to the city council. So yes, they have the authority to make certain decisions, but they are not completely autonomous. No planning commission is completely autonomous. With respect to the training itself, I'll note a couple things. With respect to the AB 1234 ethics training and workplace harassment training, that is a requirement of state law. The people who give the training, is my understanding, have to be approved by the state, and the curriculum in terms of the issues being addressed in the training has to be approved by the state, not the city council. With respect to the training given by the league, with respect to the planning commissioner's training, again, that is governed by the League of California Cities. They determine the subject matter. It is a good training. It teaches the planning commissioners, not only in Grand Terrace, but up and down the state of California, what the role of the planning commission is, the issues that they would address, such as the land use entitlements, variances, conditional use permits, things of that sort. CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, which is required on every single project that comes in front of the Planning Commission, how that works, how that can be challenged. For example, one of the issues that planning commissioners need to understand, it's a big change that I was researching earlier today, is the change of how traffic is reviewed. And that takes effect July 1st. So it's very important that commissioners understand these basics so that when the decisions come before them, they understand the basics of land use and can make the best decisions, not only for the Planning Commission, but for the community at large. And again, the City Council does not govern the curriculum for that training. That is governed by the League of California Cities. So 2 of the 3 trainings that are outlined in this resolution are governed by state law, and one, as I understand, the City Council believes would be advantageous for our commissioners to do the training, and that's a League Planning Commissioners training.
Right. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Councilmember Robles, questions?
Yeah, well, I don't have a question. When you get to the other part, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Allen, questions?
No, not right now.
Okay, so we will have time for discussion after. So I'll open it up to public comment. Are there any requests to speak? I know we had a letter that came. Would you like to summarize that?
Yes, we received an email from Commissioner Jeremy Briggs, who was expressing his concerns regarding the item and wanted to know who would be outlining the training, wanted to know if it was state mandated, expressed his concerns regarding staff hours and time that was put into the staff report, but he the main concern was who was going to decide who would be preparing the training.
All right, thank you. And no other request to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, so we will close public comment and come back to Councilmember Robles. You had comments you'd like to make.
Well, yes, I wanted to just state this is a very positive thing to adopt, because running a city has some basic items that should always be a priority, and one would be that our planning commissioners get training from the league, and I think sometimes we think, well, it's expensive to send them, or it costs money to send them, but if you're making land use decisions that are going to last 30-some years or permanently, then that's something that we ought to have a commitment to. We're required as council members also to have this training, but because we're elected, there's other issues that we have to look at, and we are going to be looking at a code of conduct for us. I don't know if we don't go to ethics training and workplace harassment training, we're not removed, but the voters should know who attended and who did not attend. But this is not any cumulative effort on this council to have a door where we can just say, a trap floor door to say, oh, here's a way to get rid of you. This is a very positive move, and it should be seen that way. And it's something that will make sure that this city has a fully trained planning commission.
Thank you. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to strongly recommend that if it's possible, we make it mandatory or use the League Planning Commissioners Academy. When I was a planning commissioner, I attended it 2 years to make sure that I got everything that they offered, because you can't get everything they offer in 1 year. And I attended both years. Some of the other planning commissioners that we still have, a couple of them, I attended it with them. I can't imagine that I would have been able to have accomplished my duties as a planning commissioner without having gone to that academy. I learned so much and that's why I highly recommend that if we can do that, make it a mandatory for our commissioners. I would just recommend it.
So are you making a motion that we adopt this?
I am.
All right.
You want me to read it?
You may.
I'm making a motion that recommend that we adopt a resolution entitled, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Grand Terrace, California, establishing a training policy for the Grand Terrace Planning Commission Site and Architectural Review Board.
I second it.
All right, motion by Councilmember Allen, second by Councilmember Robles. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously with Council Members Allen, Hussey, and Robles voting yes, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson voting yes, and Mayor McNabb voting yes.
All right, thank you. We have no request for future agenda items by the City Council, so we will move to the City Manager Communications. Mr. Duffy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to give the council an update on the 2020 activity guide. The activity guide should have been delivered to every household in the city of Grand Terrace at this point in time. And so we're getting some really good responses, and people are saying they enjoy seeing the information inside of the brochure. Also, we have a Community Day coming up on Saturday, June 6th, but this notice is really trying to get more members of the community involved. So there's a meeting this Thursday, February 13th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. in the community room here at City Hall. And so we encourage you to come out and help us plan another exciting Community Day on June 6th from 3 to 9 p.m. The rabies vaccination clinic at the City Hall will occur on Wednesday, February 19th. That's next week from 6 to 7:30. That's a chance for the residents to get low-cost vaccinations and also get their animals chipped. It's very important to get those shots in. And remember, the City Council has changed the way in which you get your licenses. Your licenses now only expire at the point of time when your rabies vaccination is expired. And so everyone has an opportunity to register their dogs. Once the rabies vaccination expires, you have 30 days before you are assessed a late penalty. Also, we want you to join us on February 27, 2020 for the State of the City address by Mayor Darcy McNabb. It's hosted this year at the Vista Blue Mountain facility, which is 22325 Barton Road. That's actually the former Brookdale facility right off Canal. It's co-sponsored by the city and also the Chamber of Commerce. Only about 220 invitations went out to the various business members of the community, and we also are opening up to the residents. We asked you to RSVP because we want to make sure that we have an exciting event, but that we don't overcrowd ourselves at our new host facility. Also coming up on Saturday, March the 7th at 8 a.m. is the annual Walk on Blue Mountain. And it's pet-friendly event, and we expect this to be another fabulous walk in Grand Terrace on the Blue Mountain. And that concludes my report, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Duffy. We do not have a closed session tonight, so we will move to adjourn. And we are doing so in memory of Charlene Hussey. That's our council member, Bill Hussey's mother. So please remember Mrs. Hussey and her family in your thoughts and prayers. We're adjourning to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held on Tuesday, February 25th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Any request to have an item placed on future agenda must be made in writing and submitted to the city clerk's office. And the request will be processed in accordance with council procedures. Thank you all for your discussion tonight. We are adjourned.